In our series about the history, culture, and challenges of the ancient Near East, this section focuses on Mesopotamia. If we take a few steps back and look at developments in Mesopotamia from a distance, we see that there was no steady progression from individual city-states to a mighty empire. Although this development did take place, it was repeatedly marked by declines and new beginnings. Over the duration of Mesopotamian history, there is a clear trend toward more complex organizations after recurrent political breakdowns. Empires also tended over time toward larger units and stronger centralization. Thus, Larson sees a system of city-states and loosely organized empires in the 3rd millennium BCE, territorial states and federal empires in the 2nd, and imperial systems in the 1st that covered the entire Near East. The periods in between are seen as Dark Ages, after which Reconstruction begins. According to Larson in Chevala's 2005:36. Now, let's take a closer look at some examples, along with the reasons for their rise and fall. The Uruk period, 4th millennium BC, was a phase of the rise of small centers of power that stood out from their rural surroundings. Uruk was one of those emerging cities. This rise did not come about through weapons. The first reason was a tenfold agricultural production through new methods in livestock breeding and irrigation channels. The second reason was that Mesopotamia had a redistributive economy. Agricultural surplus was used to build up common structures. And they had a rotary system of corvée work. Every community had at times to send workers for building projects away from home or provide housing and food for other workers. Wouldn't this be a great example for today? We often wonder why there is a lack of budget for the health system, education, and refugee aid. The downfall of the Uruk period, however, came as a surprise, without us knowing why. The second rise and zenith of Mesopotamia occurred in the 3rd millennium BC. The major reason for this period of wealth was the spread of cuneiform writing. This paved the way for trade contracts, so that business connections between local city-states and also to major centers like Egypt, the Indus Valley, and Central Asia were established. A side effect of this development was the increase of cultural diversity. This period was the most stable one and left impressive buildings like the ziggurats, irrigation channels, and also a detailed administrative system, and lots of literature. Famous rulers were Sargon of Akkad, who founded the first great empire, and Solji, who highly centralized and bureaucratized Sumer. The decline was initiated because dynasties integrated into the state sought independence, and because Elamites invaded the state territory. The third rise of Mesopotamia, 2nd millennium BC, was characterized by a shift from central power to a regional, multicentric system. Technology, socio-political organization, and military power was not in a single hand. Instead, local centers were interacting and competing. By the time the reverse process took place, major powers like Babylonia, Assyria, the Old Hittite Kingdom, Mitanni, and Egypt evolved and stretched out to annex the local powers. Treaties were written to regulate the relationships. Women were exchanged to secure influence on other thrones, and professionals were exchanged for cultural enrichment. The reasons for the downfall are very reminiscent of our own times. Globalization at that time led to harsh times. Instead of skilled workers, cheap labor was recruited. Family-owned land had to be sold to prevent poverty. The 1st millennium BC was a time of various empires. Assyria expanded and became a universal empire which encompassed Babylonia, Egypt, Persia, Anatolian kingdoms, and more regions. During the time of peace, Assyria was unable to cover the costs of maintaining its enormous state apparatus. A union of Chaldeans from Babylonia and Medes overthrew the empire. But the Neo-Babylonian Empire did not last long. New territories such as Persia and Greece, and ideologies such as monotheism, Judaism, and Zoroastrianism, and democracy rose to prominence. As a result, Babylonia fell, the Persian Empire rose, and extended as far as India. For the topic Daily Life, choose one of the two resources on the lesson page, depending on whether you prefer text or video. An overview of religion in Mesopotamia. Ancient Mesopotamian religion was polytheistic, with a large pantheon of gods believed to control natural forces and human destiny. Each city-state often had its own patron deity, such as Marduk in Babylon or Inanna, later known as Ishtar, in Uruk. Other important gods included Enlil, associated with air and kingship, and Ea, also called Enki, linked to freshwater and creation. The gods were seen as powerful but unpredictable, and humans were believed to exist primarily to serve them, maintaining temples, offering sacrifices, and performing rituals to secure divine favor. Religious life was centered around temples, often built as towering structures called ziggurats, see image, which symbolized a connection between heaven and earth. Priests played a crucial role in interpreting the will of the gods through divination practices, such as reading animal entrails or observing celestial events. Unlike the more optimistic afterlife beliefs of ancient Egypt, Mesopotamians generally viewed the afterlife as a bleak underworld where all souls went regardless of moral behavior. As a result, religious focus was placed more on securing protection and prosperity in this life, emphasizing ritual correctness and the appeasement of divine powers. Finally, read the article on Mesopotamian religion on worldhistory.com to learn more about this topic. Values. Given that Mesopotamia is merely a geographical region in which the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians existed successively, concurrently, and in conflict with one another, it seems absurd to attempt to discuss their religion collectively here. But as incredible as it sounds, according to Kuiper, it is nevertheless possible. The religious beliefs and practices of the Sumerians and Akkadians and their successors, the Babylonians and Assyrians, form a single stream of tradition. Sumerian in origin, Mesopotamian religion was added to and subtly modified by the Akkadians, whose own beliefs were in large measure assimilated to and integrated with those of their new environment. Kuiper 2011:150. As we saw in Week 2, Sitzim Laban, it was the king's duty to establish law and order on earth as a reflection of the existing order of the universe. The source of knowledge for this responsible task was not only the exorcist, but also long catalogues of sin which show behaviors the gods abhor. Among them are those that often have been the reason for conflicts, e.g. unjustified moving of boundaries, gossip, speaking boastfully, or refusing to help the poor. Botero 2001:249-250. Proverbs speak into such situations and encourage people to choose a better path. Examples. O my son, and rejoice not in the calamities of thy neighbors. If thine enemy wrong thee, shew him kindness. Ahikar 19b. If the ox kicks up dust, it gets flour in its own eyes. Sumerian Proverb Collection 2 hours 90 minutes. A hand will stretch out towards an outstretched hand. A hand will open for an open hand. Sumerian Proverb Collection 322. One cannot drag out the weak. One cannot hold back the strong. Sumerian Proverb Collection 3 hours 67 minutes. A destructive word is 4 oxen yoked together. Sumerian Proverb Collection 3:160. Such turnaround toward wisdom is reflected in many Mesopotamian epics. The Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, describes bad King Gilgamesh's oppression of his people. The strategy of the gods to challenge and change Gilgamesh is to create a copy of him in the form of a monster which he sees as a mirror of himself. He then has to ponder how he can change his path of oppression and arrogance to prudence and wisdom. Moore 2011:35-36. And if the hero can tame the vicious side of himself by wisdom, so the message, the readers can do the same. Moore 2011:38. A real-life conflict projected into the world of myths is one between residents and immigrants performing slave labor. The flood myth shows how the conflict is resolved via the wise mediation of the god Enki, and that more justice and harmony is needed in labor management relationships. Moore 2011:86-87. Examples of conflicts and how they were resolved. The local people's assembly consisting of elders, and the mayor was the place for cases like theft, or a widow who had to give her 2 small sons to the temple for debt slavery because she got into financial difficulties due to famine, family disputes of citizens, litigation between 3 brothers about the inheritance of a field, and a suit between 2 persons over a slave girl. The Law Code of Hammurabi from ca. 1750 BC, the most complete known collection of decisions and customary law, may have guided the decisions of the local assembly. This code, e.g., knows severe punishment for adultery, but gives the husband the choice to pardon his unfaithful wife and her lover. Instead of administering justice, several times the local governments were accused of being corrupt and oppressing the poor. Early Sumerian King Urukagina and Neo-Babylonian King Nabonidus saw themselves forced to limit the authority of the local governments and establish a more central, just order. For conflicts on an international level, treaties were a means often resorted to. They could be used on a basis of parity or as vassal or subordination treaties to pacify conflicts with a long-term perspective.